All right, and we're recording.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Edleman. I'm the Associate Dean and Director of Undergraduate Admission at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm joined here today with Dev Devvrat from Reed College in Portland, Oregon. I've been at Carnegie Mellon for coming up on my 20th year here at the university. Look forward to answering some questions that have been provided to us, and certainly look forward to meeting you all tomorrow or on Friday at the fair. Dev, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, like Gregory said, I'm Dev Devvrat, Assistant Dean of Admissions for International Student Recruitment at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. Been with Reed for a little over a year now, and really excited to chat with you all.
Cool. Well, obviously, um, COVID is having a major impact on all of our lives, and I think Deb and I would both like to say that we hope everyone is staying healthy and families are healthy, and you are successfully navigating to the best of your ability at this point any and all challenges that are associated with the pandemic. I'm optimistic that the end is in sight. And that we'll get there, right? We'll get there at some point in life. We'll hopefully one day return to some semblance of normal. That said, it's clear that the college admission process is going to be impacted by COVID in this coming cycle, and there might even be some lasting effects that exist in cycles down the road. You know, who knows? I think the saying that we use all the time is our headlights can't see that far down the road yet, and all we can do is try and navigate the obstacles that are currently in front of us. So we've been provided with some questions here, and I think Deb and I will just kind of go back and forth and try and answer these questions to the best of our ability. You know, I think that we would both agree these are certainly challenging times. And much like students have questions, I think the reality is in a lot of cases, the admission offices have questions too. And some of the decisions that are going to impact your journey when applying to college and ultimately enrolling in college, they're not decisions that are going to be made by an admission office. They're the decisions that will be made by higher levels of the university, or in some cases, even state and federal governments. So we're going to do our best to try and answer these questions. We'll do our best to try and mitigate any frustration you're all feeling. I mean, all I can say is we hear you. We sympathize for you. And I mean, you are certainly welcome on our college campuses, and we are excited and optimistic that sometime in the very near future, we'll be able to meet with as many of you as we possibly can face to face. So I think the first question that is on a lot of students' minds is the whole idea of SAT optional or ACT optional. There have been a flurry of schools in the United States that have gone SAT optional. And so Dev, I guess my first question to you is, I'm curious, how is Reed navigating SAT or ACT blind or optional? What have you learned? What are some of the challenges? Talk a little bit about how Reed is dealing with that
Yeah,
issue.
totally. Great question. Um, and before I answer that question, I just also want to add to Greg's point here is, you know, if we don't answer a question that you're hoping to get an answer for in this video, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to either of us. We're happy to tackle whatever questions you might have about our respective institutions and COVID. We recognize that these are, I feel like it's a very cliche thing to say it's an unprecedented times, but it truly is. And so we're going to work with you to navigate that to the best of our abilities. But to address test optional, test blind, Reed, the culture of Reed has always been requiring SATs and ACTs as part of the admissions process. And this year, we recognize that having access to those tests are much more challenging, just depending on where you're coming from. Even here in the U.S., test dates are getting pushed back and canceled, and trying to figure out ways to do it while socially distancing and whatnot. So Reed has announced that we will be test blind for the next two admission cycles. So the class of 2021 and the class of 2022 will be test blind. And how that's different from test optional is at a test optional school, you can choose not to send your scores, but if you do send your scores, they will look at it. At a test blind school, regardless of whether you send it or not, we don't look at your test scores. I still encourage you to send your test scores, and the reason, if you do get the opportunity to take the test. And the reason I encourage you to still send your scores is because we are still trying to collect that data to see if this is a long-term and sustainable thing for Reed. And we can't do that without the data. So if you're able to get your test scores and you're comfortable sending your test scores, we still ask that you do. It will not be considered as part of the admissions decision, but it helps us determine whether we can sustain being test blind for years to come for future readies. We do still require some sort of testing for international students for English proficiency purposes only, whether that's SAT, ACT, TOEFL, IELTS. If you attended an English medium school, we don't need any testing for English proficiency purposes. If you're in a country where neither of these are possible, just reach out to me and we'll work with you to talk about what our options look like. But otherwise, for purposes of English proficiency, that's the only reason we're asking for some sort of score, just to kind of get a gauge of where you're at.
And what about, does Reed utilize SATs or ACTs for any scholarship consideration?
Great question. Reed does not. So all of our financial aid is 100% merit-based. Sorry, it's 100% need-based,
Need-based.
not merit-based. So sorry. So we don't do scholarships based on merit. So everything is based on demonstrated financial need. So at the time of application, we ask students that are seeking financial aid to also submit the CSS profile, which if you're not familiar with that, that's a financial aid application hosted by the College Board, which is the same organization that puts on the SATs. And so we'll ask you to submit that. And then we put together what we call a financial aid package, a financial aid award letter. Basically, it's a document that highlights how much aid Reed is giving you. One of the benefits about Reed is that we are committed to meeting 100% of the demonstrated financial need of every accepted student. So your financial aid will reflect your expected family contribution amount. So that's all we ask is you submit that application, and then once you're accepted, we'll send you a letter and an email that highlights what that financially looks like. And it's not based on your merit or anything like that.
That's great. So I'm realizing maybe they paired up Carnegie Mellon and Reed because of the different approaches that we have. So it's interesting that Reed is test blind. Carnegie Mellon is going to be a school that's going to be test optional. And it's interesting. I mean, I can tell you that had COVID not happened, Carnegie Mellon would still be requiring the SATs or the ACTs in this coming cycle. We have dropped our SAT subject test requirement. That would have happened regardless. But SATs or ACTs would have been required in this coming cycle. Now, what's interesting is for us, the SATs or the ACTs, it helped us understand a student's context. So I think some students would believe that the SATs or the ACTs were a benchmark, and if they had a score above or below, that would dictate their admission into Carnegie Mellon. You know, and in some ways, there's a little bit of truth to that. But in other ways, the SAT or the ACT, it helped us understand a student's context in terms of a lot of students take the SATs more than once. What if a student only had the ability to take it one time? How does that student's SAT or ACT score compare to averages from maybe their high school or their community? And what does that help tell us about growth mindset? It also helps us to identify when there's a student that we want to admit, but maybe they're not at the same academic level as other students in the pool. It helped us identify students for which we could get support even prior to enrollment. So whether or not we've committed to SAT optional for one cycle, whether or not we will continue to go to SAT or ACT optional or blind in the future, I don't know yet. I'll go back to my headlights analogy where headlights can't see that far ahead yet. The university is investigating it, and we're trying to understand how not having SATs is going to impact the class. You know, tying another issue related to going SAT or ACT optional is more and more schools, as a result of COVID, had to switch to pass-fail grades at the end of their year last year, and in some cases are continuing on with that practice at the beginning part of this year. So now when you have students that don't have SATs or ACTs, and we don't have traditional grades in the way that we once did, it's interesting to think about how our college is going to navigate that. And again, I think we're not changing what we're looking for in a student, but we're going to have to adjust the lens that we're looking through in order to find those students. And how do we do that? And we have a question here in a little bit where we can talk more about that. But we're definitely grappling with this and wondering how we're going to continue to make admission decisions with less and less information being provided to us in a student's packet. Where again, SAT or ACTs are going away, grades are turning pass fail, class rank is gradually being eliminated. So it's an interesting challenge. But what I think I can tell you to reassure you is colleges will always look for a reason to admit a student. We're not looking for reasons to deny. So we will continue to do everything we can to try and advance as many students as we can through the process. We're going to have to pivot in some ways, and how colleges will do that, I think it's going to vary from one institution to the next. But I can assure you that this is not an issue colleges are taking lightly. There's a lot of resources dedicated to making sure that we're able to navigate this effectively. Dev did mention English proficiency. Carnegie Mellon does require the TOEFL or the IELTS for any student who does not list English as their native language. So that's regardless of citizenship, it's regardless of curriculum, it's regardless of time in the US or in an English speaking curriculum. It doesn't matter. If English is not a native language, the TOEFL or the IELTS are going to be required. If you choose not to take the TOEFL or the IELTS, you can certainly still apply. We're going to look for a demonstration of English proficiency in other ways. Historically, we see a large number of students apply to the university from India, and in a lot of places in the country, English is a native language. Please keep in mind, you can have more than one native language. So we're not looking to say that English is your only language, but we are looking to see that English is your native language. So that's driven by the question on the Common App. And if you say that English is not a native language, the TOEFL or the IELTS will be required. TOEFL did a pretty good job of pivoting during COVID to allow for a take-home test. Challenges can arise for students that are living in mainland China, but for the most part, outside of mainland China, there are opportunities to continue to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. Dev, if it's okay with you, I'll take the first crack at the next question because our answer is really simple. The question is, what are the ways students can demonstrate interest, and does CMU and Reed have views on what the admission office will consider acceptable? Carnegie Mellon does not track demonstrated interest in any way whatsoever. Deb, over to you.
Reed does. Reed
Okay.
does look at demonstrated interest. And there's multiple ways to determine demonstrated interest. I think the primary way is through our application rounds. We have early action, early decision, and regular decision. Early action, early decision are 2 application cycles that allow you to apply to the institution early and get an earlier response back. So you're not having to wait till March, April to hear if you were accepted to a college. These 2 deadlines allow you to apply pretty quickly. I think the first deadline is November 15th, I believe, which is the early action and early decision 1 deadline. And we'll get you a response pretty quickly. The biggest difference between the 2 is that early decision is a binding contract that says, if you are accepted to this college, that you will withdraw your application from other schools and that you're committing to that college. And that's assuming that the financial aid package and everything works for you. And so it's a little bit of a heavier commitment. So early decision, you can only pick 1 school to apply early decision. You can apply to as many schools as you want under early action and regular decision. That being said, early decision, if you know that institution, for example, Reed, if you know Reed is your #1 choice and you want to apply to Reed, you can apply as early decision. And that's the #1 way to show demonstrated interest in that college. But that's a big commitment. And we recognize that that's not for everybody. And there's a lot of other ways to show demonstrated interest: attending virtual events, coming and chatting with us at a college fair, we have several workshops that we're doing next week around the college application process. I'll be doing a session on early decision. We've got an interview workshop coming up. We've got an essay writing workshop coming up. So you attending these sessions, we track that information, and that's a way to show demonstrated interest. Sending an email to your admissions counselor, even just to introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm interested in read, I'm really excited to apply, can you tell me more? Or I'm interested in this major, can you tell me more? These are ways that we use to measure demonstrated interest. If this was a non-COVID world, visiting the college is a way to show demonstrated interest. Applying for our fly-in program. There's so many ways to show interest into the college. And so that is something that we do look at because it shows a level of commitment to the institution, and we want to honor that. We want to respect that, and so that we do measure that in the enrollment cycle. Does that mean that if you don't do all of these things that you're not going to be accepted? Absolutely not. We've accepted students in the past all the time that have showed zero demonstrated interest until we see their application, and we've still accepted them. But these are just additional factors that help in the application process. Read looks at applications in what we call a holistic manner. So that means that we recognize that there's a lot to you as an individual. If you got a poor grade in sophomore year geometry, that doesn't define you as an individual. I'm using that as a specific example because that was me in high school. I got a D in sophomore year geometry. If your test scores don't define you as a person, a letter of recommendation doesn't define you as a person. These are all things that make up a whole you. And that's what we're trying to get at with all of this. This whole application process is to determine who you are as a whole individual. Who are you going to be within the Reed community, within the Carnegie Mellon community? That's what we're trying to understand from you in your application. And so that's what the application process is. Something that Greg said that I think really rings true is that, we're going to be your biggest advocates. I think there's this perception that admissions counselors are looking for reasons to not accept you, and that's not true. I would love to accept you. Whatever you can do to make my job easier is great. But like I said, at the end of the day, we're going to be your advocates. We want you to be here just as much as you want to be here. And these are just tools that help us assess your level of success at our institutions.
Yeah, that's great. Great answer. So I think Dev, the next question is one that I know I've been getting a lot, and it's gotten a lot of attention in national and in some cases even international like social media groups, where I think rightfully so, there's been a lot of attention and care directed towards students that are first year students in college now, right? So these are the students who their senior year was disrupted due to COVID. They're students who in the United States, I can tell you there's like dances at the end of the year. It's called prom, and prom was canceled, and sports were canceled, and senior trips were canceled. And there was a lot of care and attention dedicated to those students because they were the ones that were kind of immediately being impacted towards COVID. Now those students are either on campus or in remote, and their college experience is underway. And I think now some of the shift has been focused now towards underclass students. I think the way that some of the colleges planned for how COVID would impact their student body was they increased the number of students that they admitted last year, hoping to enroll more students, right? Expecting that there would be a large number of defers or students who decided to wait a year or take a gap year before starting their college journey. Carnegie Mellon did do that. We increased the number of students that we were looking to enroll by a fairly significant number to the point where now we're actually technically slightly over enrolled. So we have more students that are in the first year class than we had anticipated. We're fine, and we're able to get those students a very solid experiences to begin their college journey. But we also had a significant number, not a significant, but a larger number of students that decided to defer. So instead of coming to Carnegie Mellon this year, they're going to come next year. I can tell you in a given year, we have about 35 students that would typically choose to defer their college enrollment. Right now, we have about 110 students that have decided to defer their college enrollment. Now, that's significant to students that are coming up through the pipeline now, because I think the fear is that that is already in some estimations 110 students that are already committed to Carnegie Mellon for next year. So I think the concern that some students have is with the increased number of deferred students, that it's going to be harder for the next cohort of students to get into highly selective institutions. And I think we just wanted to take a minute to address those concerns. I mean, I can tell you at Carnegie Mellon, we never have 100% of the students who defer come back the next year. So inevitably, students choose to take a gap year and they find other opportunities. They find other colleges that they choose to enroll in, or who knows? I mean, something could happen over the year that's going to impact their decision to ultimately come to Carnegie Mellon. So when we say we have 110 students that elected to enroll, we're not expecting that all 110 are going to come back next year. The other thing that I want to point out too is we tend to take a fair number of students off the waiting list. So while we might have a larger number of students who defer, I don't anticipate, but again, our headlights can't see that far down the road. I don't anticipate that the number of defers are going to have an impact on the number of students that we admit, but there is a chance that the defers could have an impact to the number of students that we choose to take off the waiting list. So I don't know. I mean, another option could be that the college decides to just enroll more students next year. I don't know. To be honest, the conversation could be that we decide to take fewer students. I don't think that's going to be the case moving forward because we've utilized this waitlist strategy, and it's an opportunity for us to simply take fewer students off the waitlist and keep the number of admits kind of held harmless. But until we know how many of those defers are ultimately going to want to come back next year, it's a little bit of a open-ended question right now. I think this question is going to really, the answer is going to be, it's going to be different depending on the institution. So I'm curious to hear if those conversations have been happening at Reed and how you all plan to address that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. It um it just so happened that somehow, miraculously, we had about the same number of deferrals this year that we've had every other year.
Wow. Okay.
And so it hasn't really impacted us much at all. We deferrals at Reed in particular are, I want to say, maybe a little bit more, require a little bit more attention than I think. I don't know if that's the right word. We don't approve a lot of deferrals to begin with.
We don't. Okay.
Our the process at Reed is, we want you to come, and want you to come now. We want you to be ready. And so we approved about 20 deferrals, I think, which is about on par to how many we approve every year. We were able to find ways for those students whose deferrals didn't get approved to still be able to come to Reed and still be able to engage and participate, and be involved in ways that worked for them in their life and their schedules. And it just, I mean, the stars aligned in that.
Good.
There were a small handful of students who we unfortunately were just not able to approve. We have some pretty, some requirements in order to approve a deferral. You have to submit a detailed document with a specific plan in place of what you'll be doing in that year. And there's a lot of things that you are able to do during a deferral year. There are things that we don't allow you to do during your deferral year. And so there are a little bit more stringent requirements at Reed for what and when we'll approve a deferral. Even, we were even lax in a lot of that this year because of COVID, and we recognize those challenges. But even then, we still didn't get as many requests as we thought we were going to. We anticipated a large number of requests, and just out of the way things sort of aligned, didn't get as many. We got about the same number that we usually get. That number tended to shift a little bit heavier on the international side this year. So we got a few more requests than usual from international students than we did domestic students. But the numbers themselves sort of still worked out to be pretty equal. So, but like I said, we did a lot to really help we want you to be here. We want you to enjoy your college experience. And so being a pretty small institution where we're able to sort of do those things that allow you to still be able to participate. For example, taking classes remotely at times that work with your time zone, right? We recognize taking online classes at one thing, but if that online class is at 3 a.m. your time in China, for example, when it's in the morning or afternoon here, like that's not equitable to international students, and we recognize as an institution. So we held classes here on the state side at times that we normally wouldn't have, to be as equitable as possible for both domestic and international students, and that seemed to work really well with a lot of our accepted students.
It's one of the reasons I love doing these kind of panels and conversations, is because much like the students are learning things, I'm learning things as well about the way other institutions operate. And, it's interesting where at Carnegie Mellon, you literally just send us an email and say, I would like to defer, and defer's granted.
Yeah.
The one restriction is you cannot enroll in another degree seeking institution. But we do allow students to take up to one class per semester at another institution, as long as they're not enrolled in a degree seeking institution. I'm curious though, Dev, something you did talk about, jumping around in the agenda a little bit. So historically, our international first year cohort is about 16 to 17% international. And that's right where we are this year as well. So our international numbers really weren't impacted at all in the aggregate. Understanding that individual students, I'm sure that they had some challenges, but overall, percentage-wise, we're right where we have been in previous years. I'm curious how that shaped out at Reed.
Yeah, that's a good question. We did have a little bit of an impact. We saw a little bit of a dip in our international numbers. So I think I don't do math, so I don't have percentages for you. I'll tell you numbers. I think usually our incoming class is somewhere between 300 to 400, and
Okay.
we met that enrollment goal this year. Our international students tend to be about between 50 and 60 students, and this year is about 40 to 45 students.
So a little bit of a
So a little bit of a dip, and so we made up for that. Actually, not even in first year students, we made up for that in transfer students. We had a really big transfer year this year, and so that sort of made up for that disparity, and so we did end up meeting those enrollment goals. But yeah, we did have a slight dip in international students, and like I said, we also had an increase in deferral requests from international students. I mean, it makes sense. Trying to start college virtually is a challenge, and I'm right there with you. I'm starting grad school here pretty shortly, virtually as well. So I recognize what those challenges look like. So we're doing our best to work with each student individually.
Yeah, good. I just one more, or maybe two more questions. We got to ask the questions: what activities and essays and recommendations become even more important in this year, especially in the wake of more and more schools going SAT optional, more and more schools going pass fail, class rank. And I think for us, I think the answer is absolutely, because we need something to look at, right? So I think that there is going to be an increased emphasis on the importance of those activities. Now, I say that with an asterisk to say it's never been about quantity, right? It's been about quality. So when we say that there's more of an emphasis on recommendations, it doesn't mean go out and get 4 recommendations as opposed to 2 recommendations, or essays. It doesn't mean write more essays, but longer essays, or extracurriculars, doing more extracurricular activities, because extracurricular activities were also impacted by COVID, for sure. So, I think the way I would answer this question is increased effort is in this space is going to be important, where, if you're going to write an essay, make sure you're being thoughtful and answering the questions that are asked. If I can be honest, one of the biggest mistakes that we see students make when they're answering essays is they're not answering the question. They're looking to tell us what they want to tell us, regardless of whether or not we asked a student to address that. So it's going to be a time where you are going to want to make sure that you're being as thoughtful and as careful as you can in your application. And I would also say, and I understand that there are going to be students from around the world that are watching this video. I would also caution against the use of agents, quite frankly. You know, I think in the college admission process, integrity matters. And the most important thing you can do is be as true to yourself in this college admission process as you possibly can. You know, I think that there's going to be a lot of people out there looking to make a dollar off of helping students navigate these challenges, and I think that's fine, and there are a lot of good people out there that are willing to help. But if at any time you feel like that you're crossing that integrity line and not putting forth accurate information that represents you, I'd caution you against that. Colleges are quite good in evaluating credentials. We're quite good at understanding when a student's work is their own. And there are checks and balances in place to make sure that the information that's being presented to you is being presented to us is yours. So the most important thing you can do in this process is just be you and be as true to yourself as you possibly can, and put forth a thoughtful and well put together and integrous application. If you do that, I promise you things will work out for you. There's a lot of risk associated with not putting forth your best effort or putting forth information that's not yours.
Yeah,
Deb, I don't know what you want to add. I'd
yeah, I
appreciate
would,
your thoughts and insight. Yeah.
yeah, totally. I would agree with everything you said. I think it is um, absolutely quality over quantity. I tell students all the time, I don't care if you were the president of every club at your school. That's great, good for you. I mean, by all means, good for you. But I care it doesn't mean as much if you didn't really do much in that role, right? I would rather you be a really strong member of a club and have the ability to say, look, here are all the things that I did in this club, even if you weren't the president or on a leadership role, right? Those are great, and those titles are great, and that's fine, whatever. But if you didn't do much with that role, that's what is the point, right? And so I think I would agree with everything Greg said. I don't have much more to add to that other than, at the end of the day, we're trying to get to know who you are as a person, like I said earlier, and just be authentically you in that the application. I would also say, um, your essays do that a lot of jobs, a lot of work for you. So make sure you take your time with those essays. A lot of colleges are hosting essay workshops for free. So go to a couple of those and get those tips. There's, what's that website, like the college essay guy, Ethan Sawyer. You can Google him. He's got a lot of really great tips on writing some solid essays. So just take the time with those. Make sure it's in your own voice. Don't try and write in a voice that's not yours, or don't feel like you have to be extremely poetic or write creatively or write humorously. Write in your own voice. We're just trying to get to know who you are as a person. And looking for that authenticity in that process. So that's maybe all I would add to that.
So Deb, we're coming up on time here. What
Yep.
does campus look like right now? So are kids back? I mean, what is Reed doing to mitigate any risk associated with kids being back on campus? Just what does it look like?
Yeah, great question. We are back on campus.
Okay.
We're a small campus. We're only
Right.
1,400 students, so it's a little bit easier for us um, to make it possible to have classes in person for students who, especially international students who were not physically able to come to Portland, whether it's travel restrictions or from either countries, whether your embassy wasn't open and you were not able to get a visa, whatever the situation might look like, and you're not physically able to come, we have virtual opportunities for you to take classes that are still as engaging as the conference style classes that we primarily do here at Reed. And so there's that option there as well. Otherwise, every single classroom has been reconfigured to socially distance at least 6 feet apart, if not more. We have these giant commercial extra thick tents that we've set up outside that still have the four walls, so you still especially when it comes to rain here in Portland, we get a lot of it. You're outdoors, but it's still warm and it's still as comfortable as can be. But you're outdoors, so we created some more spaces for students to still have a classroom space to meet and to physically still social distance. Masks are required on campus. Social distancing is still required on campus. We are COVID testing every student every week. On campus, as well as faculty and staff, both students and faculty and staff that are on campus and off campus. It just so happens that most of our dorm rooms at Reed were designed to be single person dorms. So we didn't have to make too many adjustments with housing. We did have a handful of doubles and triples in every building. So there's a few lucky students that got a double or a triple to themselves. But otherwise, most of our dorms were already configured for single person spaces, so that was still easy to do. When it comes to meals, we have a delivery system where we'll deliver food to you, so you don't even have to go anywhere. Otherwise, we have a mobile app that you can order your food ahead of time. We send you a notification when it's ready, and then you just go and pick it up, and then you can either take it back to your dorm and eat it there. We have outdoor seating under a big tent that's got plexiglasses and social distance where you can eat with other people still, but have the layers of protection, even when you have to take your mask off to eat. I'm sure I'm missing something. It's all very well laid out on our website. Once you go to our website, there's a big option that says, see our COVID, response. It lays it out pretty well.
I've been really impressed with the people on campus responsible for coordinating these efforts. I think the colleges and the universities, I think, to the school, have very thoughtful plans with the student safety in mind. And it sounds like at Reed, just like at Carnegie Mellon, safety is first. And we will not sacrifice safety for any reason whatsoever. I know on our campus we have something called the Tartan responsibility. And students are required to wear a mask, required to socially distance, and to the point where, actually expected to, if you see somebody not wearing a mask, to say, can you please put on your mask, and thank you for doing so. And we're about 2 weeks into campus now, and it's been going well. So we have students that live in university housing were allowed to pick one semester to live in university housing, either the fall or the spring. But that was not tied to a student's ability to take classes on campus. It just had to do with living in university housing. So we kind of separated those two. But we did put caps on the number of students in classes. So we're doing a hybrid model where some classes are in person, some classes are cyber. Classes are both in a lot of cases, where some people will be on campus and some people will be taking the class remotely. We have about 70% of our students actually in Pittsburgh, but only about 40% of the students are actually on campus taking classes. So in some cases, students are in the city of Pittsburgh taking classes, but they're still taking those classes remotely. So it's a true hybrid model where students are definitely doing both options. But much like Deb said, there are tents set up. We call them touchdown spaces, where students can sit down and take off their mask and eat a sandwich. I know that that's a space designed for that purpose. So I definitely have to give credit to our academic leaders and our student affairs people that have really put the students' well-being front and center and finding a way to educate students successfully in that space. I think I can say, and it sounds again similar to Reed, where we're not simply recording on campus presentations and telling students to watch a video. From a pedagogical standpoint, a student's ability to learn both in person and remote is slightly different. And we have challenged our faculty to make sure that we are teaching in a way that is best for that modality, and making sure that students are able to consume information, whether it's in person or remote, in a way that works best, and not trying to put a round peg into a square hole, and really kind of guaranteeing that students are having a solid academic experience, but a safe one as well. So we're at time. I know, Dev, it's always good to talk to another colleague, and I have been. It looks like I'm on campus with the Gates Center for Computer Science behind me, but I'm in my bedroom, and I can tell you, I have my own kids that are downstairs, experiencing some of the same um, challenges in educational on the same educational journey that a lot of you are. So I definitely understand. I definitely sympathize. But Dev, it's always good to talk to somebody that's not in my immediate family. So, so I appreciated the opportunity to connect. And before I turn over the microphone to Dev here, I just want to say, looking forward to talking to as many people as tomorrow. At the Carnegie Mellon table, I can tell you would be myself and our Dean of Admission and one of our Associate Directors, staffing the table, and look forward to connecting with all of you. So, Dev, I'm going to let you close us out here. So, thank you very much to everyone, and Dev, thank you for a great conversation.
Yeah, just to mirror what Greg said, thank you all for taking the time. We recognize that these are challenging times, and these are times that are requiring some creativity and requiring you to sort of step out of your comfort zone. And so I commend you for still attending these kinds of virtual fairs, and I commend you for really still thinking about your college journey and where you want to do that. And should you have any questions, I think, I don't want to speak for Greg, but I'm sure he'll agree. Like, please don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. Hopefully we'll see you at the fair, and you can come chat at our tables and our virtual tables, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and talk about, your specific situation, or answer any of your questions. We're another cliche term I'm going to use is we're all in this together, and we're all people too, and so it irks me when a celebrity says that, but I'm going to say it and tell you that we truly are excited to chat with you. The world of admissions requires us to look at a lot of spreadsheets, and so when I get to talk to a person, I also get really excited because that's one less spreadsheet I have to stare at for a while. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy and excited to talk to you. On behalf of both Reed and Carnegie Mellon, thank you all so much for attending this conversation, and we're looking forward to chatting with you all. Thanks, everyone. And I don't know how to stop the recording.